Morning everybody, how are y'all doing today? I am great because I am finally feeling well enough to actually make another video. I'm still a little bit sick, I'm not completely out of the woods yet, you might be able to hear it in my voice a little bit. But yeah, I caught like a cold or something, so that's why I haven't been uploading for like the last week. Which was both a blessing and a curse, because on the one hand, it allowed me to platinum Doom the Dark Ages, but on the other hand, I couldn't make videos, which I really wanted to do, especially since Doom is out. I gotta capitalize on it, and now is finally that time. So for today's video, we're gonna be looking at this article, which was released before the Dark Ages actually came out. This was like a reviewer who got an early copy or whatever, titled Doom the Dark Ages feels like an Xbox 360 shooter in a bad way. Now, as you can see there, again, it was published on the 31st of March, a while ago, but I didn't want to talk about it until the game was actually out because, you know, for all I knew, this could have been correct. I didn't want to talk trash about a review of a game that I hadn't even played myself yet, even though I was confident it was going to be great. But now that the game's out and I've 100%ed it, I can confirm it is absolutely incredible. And I have no idea what this person means by the game feels like a 360 shooter. It definitely doesn't. It feels like a modern game, but I'm sure we're going to find out. So yeah, without further ado, let's go ahead and get right into this and find out how Doom the Dark Ages feels like an Xbox 360 shooter, which I didn't even know that was an insult. Honestly, I thought that was a compliment, but let's get into it. Demons move in waves over cliffs slick with rain. Cultists chanting in perfect circles, pentagrams glowing beneath their feet. Okay, I'm gonna be completely honest, I don't want to read all of this. You can pause and read it if you want to. It's just exposition, though, for the article. For the sake of time, I'm gonna skip to the last sentence of the second paragraph. The Doomslayer was a slave to capitalism in Doom 2016, the soft reboot that revived the franchise, and his now origins as a slave to a religious theocracy sounds like something that could be cool as hell to explore. At least it should be. Well, I can confirm, the levels of Doom the Dark Ages were awesome to explore. And I mean, the lore, it wasn't spectacular or anything, it was just kind of there. But that's exactly what Doom lore is. It's never been the focus, at least in the modern reboot. The lore just kind of exists to take you from one level to the next and give you an excuse to kill more demons. Anyway, let's continue on. Instead of the series' signature blood-pumping running and gunning, with fast-paced demon killing scored to a metal as hell soundtrack, Doom the Dark Ages is a slower affair, and feels like a cheap copy of many other action games decidedly not named Doom, relying on dodge and parry mechanics that feel more at home in a Souls-like. This upcoming title by id Software is looking to reinvent the core gameplay of Doom that has defined the series in recent years, and the result is both lackluster and confusing. Rolling Stone recently played a work-in-progress version of Doom the Dark Ages at a preview event in Los Angeles, and although the overall premise sounded great in theory, our experience left us less than convinced that this is the story we need or really even want. We literally just started this article and I'm already about to lose it. A parry in a game does not make something automatically like a Souls-like. Can we stop comparing every game to Dark Souls? Oh my god, dude, Cuphead was the Dark Souls of platformers. Doom the Dark Ages is the Dark Souls of Doom, because there's a parry. Like, no, a parry does not automatically make it a Souls-like. And the only kind of dodging you do in Dark Ages is like in the classic Dooms where you would strafe back and forth to avoid projectiles. It's not like you're doing a dodge roll like in Dark Souls. What are you talking about? Also, tell me you haven't played the last two Dooms without telling me. Doom 2016 and Doom Eternal have vastly different gameplay, and now the Dark Ages has vastly different gameplay from both of those. Sure, Dark Ages is closer to like a combination of the two, but it's still very different. This is one of the things that the recent Doom games have done so well. Each one has been great and completely different from each other, but they all still feel like Doom. So saying that they're trying to reinvent the core gameplay, yeah, they did that with Eternal as well. It's not like 2016 and Eternal had the same gameplay loop. I mean, hell, id Software even said it themselves. 2016 was run and gun, Eternal was jump and shoot, and Dark Ages is stand and fight. Alrighty, now we're gonna jump ahead a little bit in the article because there's like 2 more paragraphs of just nothing I can really comment on. So now we're gonna get to where this person talks about the designs of the demons. The designs in Doom the Dark Ages feel uninspired. It's pseudo sci-fi medievalism done in a way that somewhat feels like Doom, with skin-crawling abominations fusing steel and flesh, but the creations feel less inspired than the classic nightmare fuel of the series, like the Kako demon. The new aberrations are big and dull, with lipless mouths unremarkable in their aesthetic, when it should be something more in line with the high-end horror art you'd find thumbing through your dad's heavy metal magazine. Feudalism in Doom the Dark Ages is a vague trapping meant to facilitate the inclusion of dragons with steel plates drilled into their exposed flesh, but little else. Doom Eternal was rife with a variety of demons, some almost entirely fused with clunky machinery and others colorfully boosted in saturation to contrast against the rich environments, oozing with lava or the acid green super gore nest that looked slick with viscera. I mean, I don't understand how these demons are less inspired than the other games. I mean, if you prefer the art style and like the more vibrant visuals of Eternal, then that's one thing. But calling these demons uninspired, I mean, come on. I mean, hell, the Kako demons were literally inspired by Doom 3, and they were changed to be more Lovecraftian to fit in with the new levels. Plus, how can you look at things like the Revenant and the Cyber Demon and say these are uninspired designs? Dude, these things are badass. The Revenant, honestly, might have my favorite design of any demon in the entire series. I'm a sucker for a skeleton in a cape, and God, it just looks so good. So yeah, let's not pretend that this game is unlike Doom Eternal, where it doesn't have a variety of designs for the demons. It absolutely does. Again, if you don't like the color palette, that's one thing. You know what? I just realized, did Alex write this article? I think Alex wrote this article, because in case you guys didn't know, he's not a huge fan of the Dark Ages. Be sure to comment telling him how wrong his opinion is, and remind him he is not being gaslit, because gaslighting isn't even real. Dude, like, what are you talking about? Are you okay, man? You sound crazy right now. Anyway, moving on. Instead, Doom the Dark Ages is flatly colored, with little contrast and less visually interesting enemies that tote around cruel-looking shields simply for the sake of the setting. There are no eye-catching designs among the batch. Environments are washed out blue or brown. Cities packed on red dirt look muddy with very little differentiation. Jesus, okay. Between these details, it leaves nothing left to stimulate the eyes other than the color-coded walls and ledges that are clearly telegraphed to climb or use the Slayer's latest addition to his arsenal, the shield saw. I mean, I completely disagree. I think the levels are stunning in design, and just because the colors are washed out or darker doesn't mean it's bad. I mean, sure, more vibrant environments like Eternal look better, or at least like are more visually pleasing to see. You know, I enjoy me some bright colors, but in Dark Ages they did a great job with their environment, and I mean, realistically, it fits the tone of the game. You know, it's called the Dark Ages. You wouldn't expect a Doom Eternal art style for a game in the Dark Ages. Alright, anyway, the next section is called Melee over Gunplay. I'm very interested to read this. The shield saw is exactly what it looks like. It's a crude-looking metal shield with a saw attachment that gives the Doomslayer another way to shred through the demons in his path. The shield saw can block attacks, reflect them, and comes packed with extra utility to traverse the map. All of these things sound cool in concept, but execution left much to be desired. Doom the Dark Ages goes the way of color-coordinated attacks. Green indicates an attack can be reflected, and red, which signifies that it's best to get out of the way. The gameplay loop falls into this rhythm quickly, funneling players into one very specific kind of play that emphasizes parries more than gunplay. But in the end, the most effective means of killing boils down to time deflections to slow down time and pummel the enemies into submission after they've been staggered with finishers. Despite being the core emphasis, melee attacks are somehow more restrictive this time around, as the Doomslayer is saddled with a gauntlet that does make punches more effective, but has a limited amount of charges. These charges are refilled over time or through killing foes, which sometimes seems counterintuitive, as the rage-filled Doomslayer should just be able to endlessly beat enemies to death without having an arbitrary cooldown attached. However, Doom the Dark Ages feels at odds with itself, as it tries to bring something fresh to the series at the cost of momentum. Dude, this is bad. Like, I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. This is really bad. Are you sure you even played the game at all? Melee is not in any way restrictive in this game. Melee is the best in this game that it's ever been in the entire Doom series. Because instead of a chainsaw to replenish ammo, meleeing is how you replenish ammo. And dude, this argument about, oh, well, logically, you know, the Doomslayer should be able to beat everybody to death without a cooldown. Hey, it's called game mechanics. You know what the Doomslayer should also be able to do? Literally rip every enemy in half and not die at all. But that wouldn't be very fun if you just could not die and you literally one-shot everything. Like, where's even the fun at that point? This is a video game. You do realize that, right? If we played as lore-accurate characters in video games, then they just wouldn't be challenging at all. And they wouldn't be much of games as they would be just hit a button and kill everything because you're that overpowered. And no, the game absolutely does not emphasize parrying more than gunplay. Is parrying a core part of the game? Yes, but you still have to use the guns after you parry. And plus, if you're good enough with the guns, you'll kill enemies before you can even have the opportunity to parry them. Guns are still the main priority in this game. And then they say that it feels at odds with itself and that it's bringing something fresh to the series at the cost of momentum. You do realize that with the shield dash, along with just the ridiculously fast sprint speed of the Slayer in this game is arguably faster than Eternal. Like, yeah, gun swapping is slowed down and it's not like a whole hot swap fest like Eternal was. But in terms of pure movement speed, this game is on par with or arguably faster than Eternal. And I'm sorry, but once again, I have to ask, how are melee attacks more restrictive in this game? They literally have more use than ever. They like kind of had a use maybe in 2016, and then in Eternal they were completely useless unless you had the blood punch. They are quite literally better than they've ever been in this game. Alrighty, now we get into the part where they talk about this game being like a 360 shooter in a bad way. I can only assume they're going to have very logical, good arguments for this. The frenetic, heart-racing sense of action that defined Doom and Doom Eternal is entirely smothered due to Doom the Dark Age's emphasis on mundane traversal, using the shield saw and the unnecessary addition of aerial levels that force the Slayer to mount the back of a dragon, which again, in theory, should be cool. However, it's reminiscent of Xbox 360 shooters from the mid-2000s, experimentally hollow, clunkily rough around the edges, and full of unrealized potential, like one of the later Gears of War games made well past the series' heyday. Flying feels like dragging your feet through the mud, the edges of the screen blurring to create a non-existent sense of speed when trying to accelerate towards the objective, consisting of 4 different airborne battleships. Each battleship has a handful of turrets and shield generators that look like the Eye of Sauron that must be disposed of before the Slayer can commandeer the ship and take it down from the inside. Instead of spewing fire at the vessels or attacking them directly with the dragon's cruel metal claws, the gameplay ends up relying on holding down one of the controller's back triggers to auto-target, then alternating between shooting and dodging green projectiles to get the job done. By the second ship, it became a test of fortitude. With exhaustive repetition of the dragon's single cinematic takedown that stretches on forever, and mindlessly shooting plate armor on enemies until they're superheated enough to shatter it with the shield saw. Piloting the Doomslayer's mech feels no different, but instead of the sluggish flying mechanics, the experience centers on weightless feeling navigation through a red-hued futuristic city filled with massive demons. There's no real feedback when going toe-to-toe with Hell's strongest soldiers. The large swings of the mech's fists or its charged punch flak punch, I think that may have been a typo, just like piloting the mech itself. Instead of moving with strength or purpose, the suit is agile, lithe, I don't know, and capable of sliding out of the way of green projectiles to trigger a slowdown and gain access to more powerful attacks. It doesn't feel in any way distinct from running around as the Doomslayer himself, which feels like a total waste of the premise. Okay, Brace yourselves, I'm about to have an opinion. I kind of agree with what this guy is saying about the dragon segments. I still enjoyed the dragon segments and thought they were good, but I definitely agree that there was a lot more potential with them. However, I think the mech sections were great. There is absolutely great feedback when you punch the Titans. It felt great. And I do think they did a very good job at nailing that heavy feeling of the mechs. Just because you're not going in basically slow motion doesn't mean you're not heavy. You know, the point of the mechs is to be big and powerful, but also, you know, kind of fast, at least when it comes to running. But the punches absolutely feel great, and dodging as well feels great, and then following up your dodge immediately with a super powerful attack to one-shot the Titans. I think it was done really well. So I'll give this guy half a point here, because the dragon sections could have been better. Although I don't agree with the point on the dragon doesn't feel like it has any speed. I think they did a great job of making the dragon feel really fast. They just missed in other areas. Like, how cool would it have been if we could have been breathing fire just on our own as the dragon instead of having it reserved just for executions? Again, were there missed opportunities? Yes, but I did enjoy what they had there. Now, the next section is about the weapons in the game, and like before, I'm gonna skip the first paragraph because it's just like an intro or whatever, nothing really to comment on. Weapon upgrading returns in Doom the Dark Ages, which will add some small variety to gunplay, but everything in the Slayer's arsenal, ranging from shotguns to plasma rifles, is already widely effective on their own, even when dealing with more agile or armored enemies. So much, in fact, that it can make melee attacks feel like a waste of time outside of using the finishers to punctuate a kill. It isn't until Doom the Dark Ages funnels the player into using the Saw Shield that the gameplay takes a dip. When the Dark Ages is actually being a Doom game instead of whatever else it's trying to be, it hits all the right notes. However, the experience becomes monotonous, with no real end in sight. Scenarios play out all the same, filled with repetitious, Jesus Christ, melee takedown animations on loop. It's hot swapping weapons to chip at armor and shields until they're ready to break, which shouldn't really be an issue, except that the pacing is a slog. Doom and Doom Eternal were games that were arguably also repetitive, but their frenetic action and breakneck pace made every battle feel like an adrenaline-pumping ballad of blood, where improvisation was key, rather than playing a tortoise behind a shield. Okay, I'm officially convinced whoever wrote this article didn't actually play the game, or at least didn't fully utilize the sprinting and the shield bashing. You've been watching the gameplay in the background the whole time. I've gotten some crazy movement in this game, and this isn't even the half of it. Like, when you get upgrades later on, you can fly around. Like I said before, Dark Ages is arguably faster than Eternal at times. And then, what do you mean that the melee attacks feel like a waste of time? They are there to, yes, they can deal a lot of damage, but they are mainly there to replenish your ammo. And then, how does the gameplay dip when the Saw Shield is added? That is when the gameplay gets awesome. Even more awesome, I should say. Everything happens so seamlessly. The parrying, the throwing the shield into bigger enemies to stun them and just unload on them. Throwing it through a group of small enemies to get a bunch of health back when you're at low health. I guess this person just despises shields. And then I love how this guy complains that the levels get repetitive when, you know, you're walking into a room, killing a bunch of demons, then going to the next room, doing the same thing. And then immediately admits that that's how 2016 and Eternal are as well. Because yes, it's an arena shooter. The first several levels are spent adding new demons, giving you new weapons, all that stuff. And then after you unlock everything, you're just focusing on upgrading what you already have and getting better with it. And then they say, oh, well, for those games, that's okay because they're super fast, but this game's way too slow. Again, I think you were just playing this game wrong. I'm not gonna lie. I'd honestly love to see footage from this guy's play sessions. I'm not expecting like Dean Takahashi levels of bad, but given he's complaining about this game being too slow-paced, I don't know. Something fishy's going on here. Alright, now we get to arguably the most controversial section of this article, the music. The music, too, sees a massive downgrade, even for people who aren't exactly into head-thrashing metal. The soundtrack to previous games perfectly married the chaos of audio to what's happening on screen. Here, it's barely noticeable. During the preview, I actually waved over a staff member to ask if the game was supposed to be silent, since there had barely been any music in the opening section. The music did kick in a little bit later, after passing through a few prologue checkpoints, but even then it would only last a few seconds as a consequence of mowing down enemies too quickly and ending the encounter. The relative silence isn't exactly a great tone setter, especially for a franchise predicated on high-octane action, paired with a raging soundtrack in tow. Now, I will say, there's a bug, I don't know if it got patched out yet, but at least there was a bug where music just wouldn't play, which is ridiculous. I can't even believe that was an issue. Like, how do you make a Doom game with buggy music? That's like making a COD game, but every time you press the fire button, it doesn't fire your gun. Because I guess basic QA testing is just too much nowadays. Anyway, now we get into the part talking about Mick Gordon's absence. The musical offerings of Doom: The Dark Ages are generic, or worse, a pale imitation of what came before. The music is heavy for the sake of it, the same aggressive drums and raw electric guitar used by modern run-of-the-mill post-hardcore bands. There is, of course, some of Doom 2016's signature industrial droning in the background of each track, trying to imbue at least some of the franchise's sonic fingerprint, but it just isn't enough. Doom: The Dark Ages feels like 2 steps back for the series that had previously carved its own lane in the modern shooter landscape. Its mechanics feel ripped from the mid-2000s, picking up dated ideas that feel out of place, while jettisoning, I'm assuming that's how you say that, the best aspects of its direct predecessors. Even after a short preview, the game's monotony was a bore, which is a cardinal sin. Doom can be a lot of things, but boring isn't one. Now, my take on the music. Is it a step down from Mick Gordon's? Yes. Is it bad? Hell no. It's still great music. The new studio did a great job. Obviously, I would have preferred to have Mick Gordon there instead, but I would not call it generic or anything like that. The music is still great, and it still feels like Doom. And then, you say it feels like the mechanics were ripped from the mid-2000s. What game from the mid-2000s did you play that was this awesome? Because when I think mid-2000s, especially shooters, I think Gears of War, Call of Duty, especially Modern Warfare, and I think of Halo. This game plays nothing like any of them. And not only does it not play like them, it also feels like just way more modern. You know what I mean? Like, those mid-2000s shooters had like that kind of lightweight clunkiness to them almost. Not that that's a bad thing. It helps give them some charm. But you know what I mean? If you've played one of those older shooters, they have like a certain feel to them that comes from when they were made. The Dark Ages, and not to mention just 2016 and Eternal as well, don't feel anything like that. Like, I genuinely don't know where you got this from. Then again, this dude probably played on controller, and that is definitely not ideal for Doom. Not throwing hate to any controller players out there, more power to you. I'm just saying, even id themselves in the past have said that Doom is definitely made for keyboard and mouse. So yeah, I don't know what ended up happening. Maybe this article was real, maybe it was a total fabrication to get clicks so they could get tons of ad revenue, because dear God, there were a lot of ads on that page. But yeah, that's basically the end of the review or the article or whatever you want to call it. There's just a brief conclusion and then it ends. Not really anything worth talking about. Overall, as you can tell, I almost completely disagreed with everything here. Look, I'm not going to give you crap if you like Eternal or 2016 more, but when you actively start trying to find non-issues with the game that you then admit are in the other games as well, that's where there's an issue, and that's where it feels like you're just complaining for the sake of complaining. Don't complain just to complain. Do it because you have a reason to. Do it because you want to see improvement in something. Speaking of seeing improvements, I really want to see an improvement in my voice, because dear God, it is going. So I'm gonna go ahead and wrap this video up. Thank you all so much for watching, especially if you made it all the way to the end. If you did, you know what? Here's a snack for you. I have, you know those Jolly Rancher chews? It's like just the chewy version of Jolly Ranchers. They're so good, by the way. They're better than the suckable versions. Pause. Anyway, here, have one. You're welcome. I hope you enjoy. Blue raspberry is the best flavor, by the way. Don't at me. Anyway, like the video if you liked it, dislike it if you didn't like it, subscribe if you want to see more. Join us every Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern for Salt streams, and I will catch you all next time.